Two shotgun blasts in the middle of the night, a mansion in Beverly Hills painted in blood, and two young men, calm, dressed in tennis clothes, telling police, "We just found our parents dead." This is the Menendez Brothers case. And today, over 30 years later, Lyle and Erik Menendez might actually walk free. Yeah, you heard that right. Two rich kids who murdered their parents, blew through their inheritance on Rolex watches and Porsche cars, turned their trial into a tabloid circus, and somehow became pop culture icons, are now facing a parole board. But this case isn't just about murder. It's about wealth, abuse, privilege, and a justice system that became entertainment. It's about how Gen Z on TikTok is suddenly obsessed with two killers from the 90s, treating them like tragic anti-heroes instead of cold-blooded murderers. Welcome back to True Crime Vault, where real crimes meet chilling storytelling. And today, we're unlocking one of the darkest chapters of American true crime. By the end of this story, you might not even know how to feel. Were the Menendez brothers monsters or survivors? It's August 20th, 1989. Beverly Hills, California. Inside a $5 million mansion, Jose and Kitty Menendez are relaxing after dinner. Their two sons, 21-year-old Lyle and 18-year-old Erik, walking carrying shotguns. What happens next is beyond brutal. Kitty is shot in the face, her body almost unrecognizable. Jose is blasted so violently that part of the skull is left on the ceiling. The brothers then get back in their car and drive off to buy movie tickets. Yeah, a movie alibi. They eat at a restaurant, watch Batman, and then head back home to discover the bodies. At 11:47 p.m., Erik makes the 911 call. His voice is shaking as he screams, "Somebody killed my parents." When police arrive, the mansion is chaos. Two wealthy parents brutally murdered. No signs of forced entry. No suspects. Just two grieving sons in tennis whites, sobbing uncontrollably. And for a while, everyone bought it. The grieving rich kid act. The orphan victims. The sympathy poured in. But the act wouldn't last long, because the Menendez brothers had secrets, and they were about to spill all over Beverly Hills. On the outside, the Menendez family looked like the American dream. Jose Menendez was a Cuban immigrant who built an empire in Hollywood as a music executive. He had money, power, connections. Kitty, his wife, was a beauty queen turned socialite. The mansion, the wealth, the luxury cars. To neighbors, it looked like perfection. But behind the gates, the story was way darker. Lyle and Erik later claimed that Jose was a monster, controlling, violent, and sexually abusive. They said their mother, Kitty, was addicted to pills, alcohol, and denial. The defense would later paint a horrifying picture: years of molestation, trauma, and fear. Erik claimed he told his mom once, and she did nothing. Lyle said he tried to protect his younger brother, but their father held too much power. But here's the problem. At first, nobody knew any of this. What the world saw were two spoiled rich kids who, right after their parents' funeral, started blowing through millions of dollars. They bought Rolex watches, a Porsche, a Jeep, $50,000 worth of clothes. Lyle hired a personal tennis coach. They even dropped $300,000 on a restaurant investment. And people started asking, who spend like that if their parents were just murdered? It didn't take long for police to notice something weird. The Menendez brothers were spending like rock stars, expensive cars, luxury trips, jewelry. Friends said they were acting strangely calm, almost like nothing had happened. Police also found inconsistencies in their 911 call. Erik's voice, though panicked, had weird pauses. Lyle claimed to be grief-stricken, but some officers said he seemed almost rehearsed. And then came the biggest break. A neighbor saw Lyle buying a shotgun the week before the murders. And the movie tickets? They had exactly the right alibi, but it looked too perfect. Investigators dug deeper. Phone records, credit cards, jewelry receipts. The brothers had gone on a spending spree immediately after the killings, clearly funded by someone's estate. Then came the bombshell. Erik's confession to a friend. He admitted in private what everyone was starting to suspect. "We did it. We killed Mom and Dad." And just like that, The perfect crime turned into a full-blown investigation. The trial began in 1993, and the media went wild. The courtroom was packed. Cameras rolled. Cable news ran 24/7 coverage. Headlines screamed, "Beverly Hills heirs on trial and rich kids cold blood." The defense? Abuse. Years of molestation. Emotional trauma. They painted Jose Menendez as a controlling, violent father who destroyed his sons' lives. The prosecution? Murder for money. They highlighted extravagant spending, lies, and planning. They argued the brothers weren't victims. They were cold, calculating killers. The public was split. Some sympathized with the trauma story. Others were horrified by the premeditation and lavish lifestyle. And then came the media frenzy. Tabloids plastered the brothers' faces on covers. Talk shows debated endlessly. It wasn't just a trial, it was entertainment. After months of testimony, the jury was hung. A retrial was ordered. And in 1996, both brothers were convicted. Life in prison without parole. But the story didn't end there. Inside prison, Lyle and Erik kept to themselves. They were separated at first, but eventually were able to communicate. Meanwhile, outside, pop culture had its eyes on them. True crime books, documentaries, and TV specials kept their story alive. Fast forward to the 2020s, and suddenly, Gen Zs discovered them on TikTok. Clips from old trials, memes, and tragedy or evil, debates went viral. Some users called them tragic anti-heroes. Others were shocked. How could anyone sympathize with people who killed their parents? The brothers' fame, or infamy, grew decades after crime. And then a twist nobody expected. The parole board. It's 2025. Over 30 years after the murders, Erik and Lyle Menendez are finally up for parole. How did this happen? Well, their life sentences were reduced due to California law changes, giving them a shot at release after decades behind bars. The parole board is tense. They weigh everything. The severity of the crime, the brothers' behavior in prison, and the psychological trauma they claim to have suffered as teens. Victims' families aren't buying the trauma defense this time. The Menendez parents' friends and relatives packed the hearing room, emotional and angry. But the brothers' lawyers argue that both men are rehabilitated, educated in prison, and remorseful, at least officially. Outside, media outlets are exploding. Headlines scream, "Menendez brothers could walk free?" Beverly Hills killer's parole hearing sparks outrage. And on TikTok, Gen Z is debating. Are they innocent survivors or cold-blooded murderers finally getting a break? The public is divided. Some see the brothers as victims of abuse who snapped under trauma. They point to decades in prison and mental health considerations. Others see rich kids gaming the system. They killed their parents and might get out? No way, is the common sentiment. Online debates rage. Twitter threads explode. TikTok videos rack up millions of views. Every comment section turns into a moral battlefield. Is this justice or a failure of the justice system? Even psychologists weigh in. Some argue the brothers' story highlights the complexity of human behavior. Abuse, privilege, and premeditation all tangled in one horrific act. Whatever side you're on, one thing is clear. This story still captivates, terrifies, and fascinates. Imagine it. The Menendez brothers leave prison after 36 years. How would society react? How would victims' families cope? And how would the world view Erik and Lyle? Villains, survivors, or some twisted combination of both? The parole board's decision isn't just about two brothers. It's a test of the justice system, a question about rehabilitation, and a reflection of society's obsession with crime stories. And let's be honest, this is the kind of story that makes headlines for generations. People will debate, make memes, argue online, and dissect every moment of their lives. Because some stories don't die with the criminals. They live forever in the public consciousness. So what's the truth? Were Erik and Lyle Menendez victims of abuse who made a catastrophic mistake? Or were they privileged killers who got away with murder for decades? The answer isn't simple. The Menendez brothers' parole hearing is a reminder that crime, wealth, trauma, and media attention create a story so wild it feels like fiction. And here's the cliffhanger. The decision hasn't been finalized yet. Will they walk free? Or will justice or revenge finally catch up to them? One thing's for sure, whether you see them as monsters, survivors, or something between, this story will haunt the headlines, your feeds, and your mind for a long time. Thanks for watching True Crime Vault. If you thought this story was chilling, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the next case we dive into, because the truth is always stranger than fiction.